Snow explodes in a mist inches from Chief Nolan's cheek as another burst of machine gun fire rakes the valley. He ducks lower behind the half-buried truck, shoulders slamming into cold steel, breath tearing out of him in white jets that vanish in the brightness. The world is white and noise and impact, rounds whipping overhead, snapping into rock, whining off metal. Somewhere to his left a man groans, wet and broken. "Doc, keep pressure on him." Nolan bellows, voice shredded by the roar of gunfire. The medic is half-splayed behind a jagged rock spur, both hands jammed into the torn plate carrier of a teammate whose blood is already painting the snow a deep rust. A tourniquet hangs loose around his neck, waiting for the second he has enough slack to cinch it. His gloves are black and slick. The air stinks of cordite, burned oil, and hot metal. Smoke snakes from the barrel of their only remaining light machine gun. Its gunner sprawled prone behind a low rise, cheeks frosted with ice and sweat, yelling hoarsely every time he squeezes the trigger. 2 o'clock. High tree line, someone shouts. The gunner pivots, rips off another wild burst toward where tracer arcs wink through the trees. The barrel is done. Too many belts, too fast. It's glowing, smoking, coughing rounds now instead of hurling them. Brass piles around him, half buried in drifted snow. The valley is a bowl of white and rock, a high-altitude chute choked with glare. The seal element is jammed into its center. 10 men trying to become shadows behind busted boulders and the half-exposed skeleton of an old vehicle that's been frozen into the hillside since whatever war came before this one. They're small, dark flecks against the snow, pinned by fire coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Tracer ignites the air, green and red and ugly. It slashes down from the left ridgeline, from the right-hand tree line, from some invisible perch straight ahead. It's the geometry Nolan has seen too many times in training slides and never wanted to see in real life. A perfect L-shaped kill zone, interlocking fields of fire raked down onto a valley floor too flat, too open. "Satellite's dead, Chief." Petty Officer Garrison yells from the other side of the truck, hunched over the radio pack. The little device that's supposed to be their lifeline to higher command stares back at him with a blank, static-filled screen. The scrolling bars of signal strength are gone, replaced with hard little error icons. "I've got nothing, data, voice, it's all jammed." "How the hell is it all jammed?" Nolan snarls, ripping the handset from him by the coiled cord. He listens for the reassuring hiss of someone, anyone, talking back. There's nothing. No air controller demanding coordinates. No board watch officer asking for sitrep. Just a low, angry hiss and the occasional snap of interference. Snow kicks up in front of his face as a round slams into a nearby rock. He flinches, the handset sparking as it bounces off the truck and lands half buried in powder, little arcs of blue crawling across its shattered casing. "Mortars!" Doc yells. The first impact lands high, behind them on the slope. A dull whomp, then a crack of shrapnel ripping downhill like invisible hornets. Nolan feels fragments whip overhead, hears them hit the vehicle with a sound like someone beating on the hull with a fistful of nails. Second impact, closer. Snow and frozen dirt erupt in a dirty fountain just beyond their boulder line. Big chunks of ice sting his neck. Someone shouts a curse as a piece of rock ricochets into his helmet. Third impact lands too close for comfort. The blast flattens him into the snow, ears ringing, lungs punched empty. When he blinks the brightness away, he sees a jagged hole where a chunk of their cover used to be, and fresh blood spattered across the snow in a spray pattern he refuses to look at for more than a heartbeat. They're walking it in. Garrison gasps from the ground, halfway rolled onto his side, one arm over his head. "They're bracketing us." No kidding, Nolan thinks, but what he says is secondary positions. "We gotta move." Except they don't, because every time someone breaks from cover, the valley comes alive with a focused, punishing wall of fire. It chews apart the snow where they try to slither to the next rock, catches at their packs, bites at their boots. This is not random, not malicious spray and pray. Every burst feels controlled, dialed in, like someone is pulling strings from above and seeing everything. A scream rips through the chaos. "Marksman's hit!" Comes the follow-up, shouted from down the line. He's down, he's hit bad. Nolan risks a look. 30 meters away, the designated marksman lies twisted in the snow beside a dropped rifle, crimson seeping under him in a spreading halo. Hands claw at him, trying to drag him back, but each attempt draws another volley of precise, punishing fire. They're being pinned, not just in space, but in rolls. Every specialist they lose makes them that much smaller. Son of a mutters Senior Chief Rowan, the older operator with the salt and iron beard, his back wedged against the truck, rifle propped on his knee. His eyes flick toward the middle of their huddled knot. That's it then. We're out of long glass. A voice, younger, cracks over the local net. Chief, I can take his. Rowan cuts it off with a bark of bitter laughter. She's only 19, he snaps. We need a real sniper, not a kid who just got her tab. Round smack into the truck like a giant's hammer. Nolan feels the vibration in his spine. Hot metal stings his forearm. Shut it, Rowan, he growls, but the older man's doubt hangs in the air, heavy and ugly. Another mortar whistles in, detonates closer still. The blast flings snow and ice over them in a freezing curtain. For 1 second, the world goes white. Just white and pressure in the distant, underwater sound of men yelling. In that flash of obliterating brightness, far away from the half-buried truck and the bleeding men, a gloved hand eases the bolt of a rifle forward. The action cycles with a soft, mechanical satisfaction. Metal against metal, oiled and precise. Breath fogs the already smeared glass of a scope, leaving small crescents clear where an eye has patiently stared through for long minutes. The hand belongs to a figure pressed into a hollow in the mountainside, half concealed by a scrim of wind-scoured snow and rock. We don't see her face yet, just a strand of dark hair that's escaped her beanie, plastered to her cheek by melted snow. Just the slow, deliberate rise and fall of her shoulders as she breathes, counting beats between heart rushes. Through the glass, the valley below shrinks, edges sharpened. The half-buried truck becomes a toy. The men around it, insect small. The tracer looks less like chaos and more like threads in a web, lines converging toward a single luminous point. She adjusts a dial with 2 fingers, barely breathing. Wind 3, left to right, she says, voice low and even, piped in a short-range intra-squad net that still crackles alive in their helmets. Target distance 775. Steep angle. Holdover adjusted. Nolan's head jerks at the sudden calm in his ear. Who is that? Rowan snarls between bursts, sending a controlled trio of rounds toward a muzzle flash in the trees. Maya. The voice doesn't waver. No call sign, no rank. Just that single syllable, steady as a metronome. I have eyes on the source of the silence. The what? Nolan coughs, spitting grit. Say again. Jammer node. She clarifies, but there's something about the way she said first that sticks. Source of the silence. Power and control, sitting on a 3-man team at the base of the outcrop, 200 up from your position, 3 degrees right of your current front. If I drop it, your long-range comms come back. Another mortar lands. The blast sends snow cascading over their heads like a wave frozen mid-collapse, then abruptly thawed. Shrapnel rattles off the truck, singing. You see that from where you are? Garrison croaks, still hugging the ruined radio pack like it's a wounded animal. Affirm. Her tone doesn't change. Wind, range, target facts stacked neatly. Recommend priority engagement. Rowan snaps. You don't get to recommend anything, kid. You've never seen this kind of. Rowan. Nolan snaps, voice cracking. Shut up. There's a heartbeat where all he hears is his own breathing, the distant echo of outgoing rounds from the tree line. He pushes his helmet harder against the metal, closing his eyes. It's insane to stake all of them on a 19-year-old with a clean uniform and barely any lines on her face. It's insane not to, when everything else is failing. Confirm. Loss of target means loss of jamming, he asks into the net. Negative, she answers immediately. Loss of power and controller. Jamming stops. They'll try to reboot, but you get a window. What about collateral? Nolan forces himself to ask, even here, even now. You got any civvies in your backdrop? A beat. Just long enough for doubt to creep in, then. Backstop is rock shelf. No civilian presence in my lane. Shot is clean. She might be lying, he thinks. She might not know what she can't see. But then another mortar slams in, close enough to shower them with actual stones. One chunk bigger than his fist glancing off the truck with a clang that leaves a new dent a foot from his head. Doc yells for more gauze. The wounded man by his hands gives a weak, guttural sound that doesn't sound like language. The machine gun jams mid-burst, the gunner swearing as he slaps at the side of the weapon, trying to coax another belt through a barrel that's all but melting. Something inside, Nolan edges over. The balance between pride, protocol, and survival tips. Maya, he says, choosing the name like a rope. You're green. Take the shot. The world retracts down to the dark ring of her scope. Breath in, breath out. The pad of her finger settles against the trigger, taking up slack until only a whisper remains between pressure and release. Wind burns her cheek. Snowflakes drift lazily through the air between her and the valley, deceptive because the air itself is moving hard, a river spilling over ridgelines and roofs of trees. She holds, edges, lets her heartbeat fall into a slower rhythm. Counts. 1, 2. Her lungs fill with the coldest air she's ever tasted. She exhale holds. The trigger breaks. The sound of the shot is small against the thunder of the battle. A single muted crack that rolls back across the snow and is swallowed by the larger noise. For a fraction of a second, the bullet leaves a trace in the air only she could ever see, an imagined silver thread arcing through the white over abyss and rock and men. Then nothing. Black. In the darkness, voices overlap in a jagged audio montage. A panicked shout of "We're pinned. They've got us in a kill box." A radio voice, suddenly loud and clear, demanding coordinates. The phrase broke the siege, spoken in disbelief. And, cutting through, a third voice later, calm and official in a wood-paneled room. "How old did you say she was?" "Sir, she's only 19. Hours earlier, the mountains look almost peaceful. The forward operating base squats at the edge of the snowfield like a cluster of gray Lego bricks forgotten by a giant child. HESCO barriers form uneven walls around tents and prefab huts, sagging under the weight of snow packed against them. A pair of helicopters sits on the pad, rotor blades tied down, their shadows short and sharp in the flat winter light. Cold has a different sound here. It hums under everything. The chop of distant rotors spooling, the crunch of boots on crusted snow, the murmur of men and women getting ready to go somewhere they might not come back from. Nolan stands at the open door of the briefing shack, watching powder swirl in the rotor wash as one bird idles, warming up. The air tastes like jet fuel and coffee. His men file past him, nodding, some clapping him on the shoulder, most just securing straps and checking gear with a blank, inward look of people already partly gone. Inside, the briefing table is slick with laminated maps and a couple of smudge tablets. A digital projector throws a grainy, gray-toned image onto a sheet hung against the wall. A satellite view of a narrow valley. Lines of contour jagged and close. A thin seam of darker gray marking a road or dry stream bed. "Okay, listen up," Nolan says once they're all in, stomping snow from their boots, breath steaming. He's got one gloved hand around a mug, the other tapping at the tablet on the table. "We've had 3 drones go dark in this corridor in the last week. 2 patrols reported comm dropouts anytime they got below this ridge line. HQ thinks someone's playing with signal up there." He taps again, zooming the image until the valley fills the makeshift screen. The edges of an old cable station appear on one slope. A few boxy shapes that might be vehicles, half buried. "We're going to hike in, confirm, or deny. They want eyes on and pictures of any relay or jamming infrastructure. We don't go loud unless we have to. We're a recon element with teeth, not a raid tonight." "Copy." A rumble of assent circles the room. The intel chief, a compact officer with wire-rimmed glasses that don't quite hide the veteran in his eyes, steps in. He tosses a hard case on the table with a thud. It's the size of a carry-on, matte black, crisscrossed with straps. "This rides with you," he says. Inside is pattern of life data and route mapping we've compiled for the last 3 months. All unencrypted once this lid is up. If they get their hands on it, they get her drone routes, convoy timing, patrol schedules. They'd kill for this. So, do not let it out of your sight. If things go sideways, we have protocols. He doesn't say what those are, but the silence fills in the blanks. At the back of the room, near the door, a young woman in snow camo stands very still. Her face is a few degrees younger than anyone else's, cheekbones sharper, eyes darker. She's neither hiding nor demanding attention, just absorbing. So 3 Reyes, the intel chief adds, nodding in her direction. Attached marksman. Top scores at school. Don't let the age fool you. A snort escapes from Rowan, who is leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. Schoolhouse range isn't a mountain movement, he mutters just loud enough for a few to hear. Reyes doesn't flinch. Her gaze stays on the projection, tracking the valley contour as Nolan continues. This terrain naturally funnels anything on foot or vehicle along the valley floor, Nolan says, tracing with a gloved finger. These ridges here are too steep on the map to worry about climbers. We'll put our overwatch here. He indicates a lower spur, covering the approach and the suspected relay point near the cable station. Reyes shifts her weight. That's all. Just a tiny transfer from one foot to the other, the sort of micro-movement of someone holding backwards. You see something, Reyes? Nolan asks, catching it. She clears her throat. Sir, on that last drone feed, she steps closer, thumb flicking her own tablet awake. I notice some track patterns up on this ridgeline. She expands a frame. Faint darker lines etched like veins across a white slope. These don't match standard shepherd routes. They're too regular. And here, she taps a tiny glint frozen in the frame near a rock outcrop. There's metal catching light where the map says it should be dead ground. Could be debris, Rowan says dismissively. Old cable gear, junk, locals drag, all kind of trash up high. Could be, she agrees quietly. But the tracks are recent. It snowed 2 days ago. The edges are clean. The intel chief peers over her shoulder, frowning. We don't have enough resolution to confirm hardware, he says after a moment. We'll note it. Our primary suspect is still the cable station. That's where you'll focus first contact scans. Nolan watches Reyes' jaw tighten briefly, then relax. She steps back into the shadow of the room, folding in on herself again. Gear, check-in 15, he says, ending the brief. Pick your layers right. It's going to be cold and slow. In her bunk, Reyes sits on the edge of the mattress and stares at the photos taped up above it. One is of a dark, wet forest back home, shafts of light slanting through tall trees. 2 figures in camo stand in the middle, one taller, older, smiling with an arm slung around her shoulders, the other a younger version of her with a shy, unfinished grin. Next to the photo is a carefully folded flag in a clear plastic case. It takes up more space than it should in the cramped berth. She rests her fingertips on the plastic for a moment. The room is quiet except for distant rotors and muffled laughter from down the hall. You tell me not to think about it, she murmurs, barely audible. Just do the math and press the trigger. She reaches under her pillow and pulls out a small, worn charm, a flat disc of metal with an engraving rubbed almost smooth by years of fingers. She tucks it under the stock of her rifle, securing it with a strip of tape until it disappears into the lines of the weapon. Private ritual complete, she starts the familiar dance of checks. Bolt cycles clean, optics clear, backup optic mounts tight, rangefinder battery solid. Outside, in the motor pool, men move like slow machinery as they load gear. Reyes falls into the flow. Her pack heavier than her frame suggests it should be. She checks her position in the column. Mid-pack, not forward. The senior sniper grins at her as he slings his own long rifle. Stay behind me and watch how the grown-ups do it. He jokes, not unkindly. You'll get your shots in when it's safe. She smiles back because that's what's expected. Inside, she files away the line like a round chambered for later. On the perimeter of the base, snow lies undisturbed except for a few sets of fresh footprints. Reyes pauses for half a second, crouches. The prints are deeper than the others, heavier loads. Some come in, but a few wander off toward the ridgeline opposite the planned route, circling wide. She traces a boot edge with one finger, feels the crisp lip where snow has packed, and hasn't yet drifted over. Something? Nolan asks, coming up behind her. Just, she starts then stops. There are tracks everywhere around any base. Local workers. Sodders. Dogs. She's new. She's 19. She tells herself she's seeing what she wants to see. No, sir. Just checking. He nods and moves on. As they step through the wire and out into the open snowfield, the mountains loom higher than any satellite image can capture, jagged teeth gnawing at the sky. The air is skin-piercing cold. Each inhale a small act of will. The hike into the valley starts quietly. Boots crunch in rhythm. Gear clinks. Breath steams. Twice, distant goat bells drift down from the slopes. A small reminder that they are not the only lives threading these ravines. Hours stretch. The sun doesn't move much. It just brightens and flattens, erasing shadows until the whole world feels like it's been cut from white paper. The valley they're heading for sits ahead, a faint V in the horizon. Reyes lags intentionally half a step, letting herself fall into a scanning rhythm. She sweeps the ridges, left, right ahead, tracks rocks, shadows that might be hollows or might be dug fighting positions. Everything cataloged, layers stored. When they crest the last low rise before the valley, she stops. The terrain ahead tightens, the walls drawing in like the sides of a funnel. The floor is nearly level. The snow there oddly pristine compared to the churned path they've just walked. It's made to catch things, she murmurs before she can stop herself. Say again, Rowan asks. She straightens. The way the walls bend. If you wanted to trap vehicles or people, you put fire along those lines. She gestures to imaginary arcs along the ridges. Rowan snorts. It's a valley, Reyes. They're all made to catch things. That's why we're walking instead of driving a bus. Overwatch team will be on that spur, just like the book says. We'll be fine. She glances at the higher ridgeline, the one from the image where she saw the glint. It looms further out, steep, ugly but not impossible. The tracks she'd seen up there won't leave her mind. Senior, she says to the other sniper, if we push Overwatch higher, maybe along that. He shakes his head. Too exposed. Too much climb for too little payoff. We stick to the plan. Her gaze drifts to the far slope. A small cluster of shapes moves near an old cable tower. Dark blobs against the snow that resolve into people and animals when she stares. A shepherd family, it looks like. One kid runs after a goat, falling in the snow and laughing. The sound doesn't reach them, but she imagines it anyway, hears it in her memory of home. Locals, someone notes over the net. ROE stands, Nolan replies. No engagement unless clear hostile intent. Stay focused. Reyes nods to herself. She files that away, too. Cable tower. Civilians. Line of fire. Then they descend into the valley that, a few hours from now, will be exploding around them. At first, it's just cold and quiet. The patrol snakes between low rocks, breath fogging. Every footstep creaks as boots compress crusted snow. The sky is a washed-out sheet with no texture. Reyes keeps to her place in the column, eyes drifting up more than forward. That particular ridgeline that bothered her on the maps still bothers her now. It doesn't look like the too steep terrain the imagery suggested. There are faint lines on it, scars where snow has been kicked loose, dark patches where rock shows through in ways that suggest more than weather. She opens her mouth to say something. A sharp, artificial metallic crack interrupts her. It comes from ahead, under someone's boot. There's just enough time for the point man's curse to begin before the pressure plate completes the circuit. The blast is a gut punch of sound and light. The front of the column disappears in a tide of white and dirt. Reyes' teeth slam together. For a heartbeat, she hears nothing but the hollow ringing of her own skull. When sound floods back, it comes roaring, men yelling, someone screaming, the crump of falling rock, the creak of metal torqued out of shape. The point man is gone. Where he was, there's a crater hissed over with settling dust and snow. A second operator lies nearby, thrown onto his back, legs twisted in unnatural angles, a thin wail leaking from him. Contact front, someone shouts, reflex more than observation. Then the valley truly wakes up. Machine gun fire rips from the left-hand slope, stitching a line across the snow right in front of their boots. As they dive, a second gun opens on the right, rounds slamming into the ground at an angle that catches anyone showing the slightest silhouette. Snow erupts into continuous mist. The air fills with the flat, brutal sound of high-caliber rounds. L-shape, Nolan shouts, even as he scrambles for the nearest rock. Break contact. Smoke. Grenades arc from their line, tumbling end over end before belching thick clouds that immediately get torn apart by the wind racing down the valley. It's not enough. The geometry is wrong. The valley floor is too open, the rocks too low. Everywhere they try to move becomes a beaten zone. Garrison, get higher on that net. Nolan growls as he drags a wounded man behind the half-buried truck. Call for fire now. Garrison collapses behind the vehicle, yanking the satellite handset from its cradle. Fingers fly. Frequencies roll. He holds the device close, as if proximity will coax it into life. There's nothing. Only a long, unbroken hiss. Come on, he mutters, slapping it. Little error icons bloom on the screen like malignant flowers. Data link bars collapse. The small status text scrolls through failure messages. I've got no SAT, he yells over the roar. No data, no voice. It's all jammed. Whatever they're running, it's full spectrum. Mortars join the symphony, a single distant thump, then an explosion far behind them on the slope. Snow fans out. The second round lands closer, showering them with icy debris. The third is close enough for Reyes to feel the blast in her chest, hot shards of rock sizzling past her. They're adjusting, Doc calls out, his voice tight as he clamps a tourniquet onto the thigh of the man beside him. They're walking it onto us. Reyes' heart beats, so loud she can feel it in her fingertips. But her hands are steady as she drops to a knee and snaps her scope up. Through the glass, chaos pulls into focus. Muzzle flashes cordon the ridges. She traces the arcs of tracer to their sources, sees outlines of crew-served weapons tucked behind cross-hatched logs and rocks. Above and beyond them, up against the ridge she had flagged earlier, something else catches her eye. A thin metal mast, barely visible against rock, topped with an improvised array of plates and wires. Cables snake from it down into a clustered knot of figures huddled around crates and electronics. A man with a headset leans close to a small monitor, nodding, gesturing, shouting into his mic as if he can push the bullets himself. Jammer, she breathes, half to herself. She keys the local net. Chief, I've got eyes on a mast at 200 degrees up high. Looks like power and control for a jamming node. 3-man team, plus a headset. They're tied into this whole thing. Her voice hits the comms at the same time as a new barrage of fire. The words jumble with other shouts. What? Reyes, I can't. Nolan ducks as a round snaps by his head. Not our priority right now. We're getting chewed up. She grits her teeth. Of course it's their priority. No comms means no air, no artillery, no exfil. But she's mid-column, huddled behind a rock like everyone else, her line of sight broken and flickering. The senior sniper, 3 positions ahead, is already trying to get his own shots off. It doesn't matter. A crack like a small branch snapping in a frozen forest rings out, distinct from the overlapping guns. The senior sniper jerks, then folds backward. Snow rises around him. For a heartbeat, his rifle hovers above his chest as if suspended by strings, then falls. Marksman's hit, someone screams. He's down. Reyes' stomach lurches. Her world narrows to that one body and the unseen hand that took him. She turns her scope, hunts for the glint, the angle. Somewhere, an enemy sharpshooter is installed in a hole as good as any she's ever dreamed of. She can't see him. Not yet. The mortar fire tightens. Another shell slams in just beyond their makeshift line, pulverizing the top of a boulder into a rain of sharp gravel. The wounded man Nolan dragged behind the truck coughs blood, each breath whistling. How long on our ride? Rowan calls out, firing short, controlled bursts toward the trees. Nolan checks his watch. The extraction window is a hard number in his head, one they synchronized with the bird crew at the pad. Time heaves forward like a cliff. If they can't reach us, they're not coming, he answers. They're not flying a bird blind into this valley. An attempt to flank along the valley wall begins almost reflexively. Two men peel toward the right slope, trying to hug the rock and find a way out of the kill zone. They've gone maybe 10 strides when one hits another plate. The second blast is lower, nastier. It blows a man sideways in a spray of snow and flesh. The other is shredded by rock slivers. The slope behind them churns as the pre-sighted machine gun shifts fire, making clear that every path they think of has already been gamed out by whoever set this up. This is rehearsed. Nolan realizes aloud, half to the others, half to himself. This is not some random village defense. They built this valley to kill us. And somewhere above, someone is watching it all and assigning fire with the calm of a kid playing a strategy game. The black hard case lies half submerged in snow near the wrecked front of the column. It's been dropped when the point man went down. Rounds kick up around it as enemy fighters to the front push a little farther down the slope, risking exposure in their hunger for it. Reyes sees them through her scope, a pair breaking from cover, bent low, eyes fixed not on her team, but on that box. They're going for the case, she warns, voice sharp. Everything is going for us. Rowan grunts, his rifle barking. But he shifts his fire, picks off one of the advancing figures. The second dives behind a rock, pinned for now, but not dead. Reyes takes a breath that tastes like cold metal and fear. The valley is eating them, one small bite at a time. Long-range comms are dead. Standard responses are useless. Mines have teeth where flanking legs should be. And the only person here who sees the entire shape of the trap is the one they trusted the least. I can get above them, she says into the net, voice sudden and steady. There's a shelf up high. From there I can see the jammer, the sniper, the mortar spotter, all of it. I can clean this up. Negative. Nolan snaps automatically. Too steep. We don't even know if that shelf is stable. You'll be exposed the whole way up. Another mortar lands. Snow and rock blast around them. A piece of something, not sure if it's stone or steel, strikes Nolan's shoulder, spinning him halfway. Chief, she says, and there's something in the way she says his title that cuts through the noise. Standard isn't working. You know it. Let me work. Absolutely not. Rowan barks over him. Then a round slams into the edge of his cover, showering him with rock chips. He spits blood and bits of tooth into the snow and keeps firing. The wounded teammate's breathing turns shallow and fast. Doc glances up, eyes measuring more than distance now. He's not going to make it if we're still here in 10, he says quietly. Maybe less. The valley feels like it's closing in, angles tightening. Another mortar hits. This one is close enough to lift Nolan off his feet. The blast wave slams him into the truck. For a moment, the sky goes white again. He tastes dirt and copper. When he blinks and the world snaps back into focus, he sees the jagged hole the explosion chewed in the top of their cover. Any closer, and the next one will take the whole vehicle with it. Chief, Reyes' voice crackles in his ear. This doesn't get better. It just gets narrower. He drags himself upright, one hand on the cold metal, the other clenching around his rifle. The doctrine in his head battles the reality in front of his eyes. She's 19. This is a nightmare. But she's also the only one not panicking. The only one seeing beyond the nearest rock. Fine, he grits. Fine. You are green. You move. You climb. You get up there, and you kill the source of this silence. You understand? Copy, she says, and then she's moving. Reyes strips weight without thinking. Pack comes off and gets dumped behind a rock. Extra ammo. She doesn't absolutely need stays with the others. She checks that she has what matters. Rifle, a handful of mags shoved in her plate carrier, compact med kit, spare battery for the short-range radio. Take mine, Garrison gasps, shoving a half-charged battery at her from under the truck. If you can get us a bird back, you can have anything you want. She tucks it into a pouch, gives his shoulder a squeeze. Then she waits. The timing is everything. Right now, the enemy's attention is on the main cluster of seals. Mortar adjustments. Machine gun arcs. They think they've got their toys where they want them. Another shell whistles in. It slams into the slope just above them, blowing a wave of snow down over the truck, over the rocks, over the men. Visibility collapses into choking, swirling white for 3 heartbeats. Reyes uses those heartbeats like a rope. She pushes off, sprinting from cover, boots slipping slightly on the sudden looseness underfoot. The air outside her rock feels like a different planet, full of hot metal and cutting wind. She doesn't look at the machine guns. That way lies flinching. She fixes her eyes on a narrow, dark chute in the rock wall ahead. A crack that climbs, jagged, toward the high shelf she's been watching since they entered the valley. Bullets chase her, but they chase ghosts. The blowing snow hides her better than any smoke grenade. A few rounds snap, close enough that she feels the pressure on her skin, but none bite. She dives into the base of the chute and presses herself flat against stone. The cover here is better, not because it's safe, but because no one expects anyone to be stupid enough to be here. The climb is its own battle. She wedges toes into cracks, fingers into barely there holds, hauling herself up one body length at a time. Her rifle is slung tight across her back, weight pulling her sideways. Snow sloughs under her boots with each step, sliding away in small avalanches that tumble down into the valley. She feels the wind harder now, shoving at her side, trying to pry her off. Below, muted by height and rock, the firefight continues. Gunfire is a dull chopping sound. Mortars are distant thunder. She tries not to imagine what each detonation is doing to the men she just left. Halfway up, she pulls herself onto a small ledge the width of her boots. As she shifts, something sharp smacks into her shoulder. There's no impact of a bullet, more like a slap of debris, but it's enough to jolt her rifle against the stone. She feels it instead of hears it. A crack under her fingers as the main optics glass takes a glancing blow. When she swings the rifle around to check, spiderweb fractures bloom along one edge of the scope. The center is clear, but the periphery is smeared, distorting. She swallows a curse. Backup plans exist for a reason. She reaches up, pops the quick-release mount on the main optic, lets it dangle just enough to screw on the small backup, low-power optic kept clipped to her harness. It seats with a click. Not ideal. Less magnification, less light, less of everything. We adapt, she tells the mountain quietly. We always adapt. A gust of wind tears at her, forcing her to flatten for a moment, cheek pressed to wet rock. When it passes, she pushes higher. Near the top, where the angle eases just enough to allow her crawl, she hears something that's not gunfire. Bleeding. She freezes, turning her head slowly. Through a gap in the rocks, she sees the back slope leading up to the old cable tower. A handful of goats pick their way through snow, noses buried as they forage. Beside them, huddled in a threadbare coat, is a girl no older than 10. She holds her arms around herself and stamps her feet, trying to stay warm, eyes flicking nervously toward the echoing sounds of battle from the main valley. The antenna mast Reyes saw in the drone feed stands only a short distance behind the girl, bolted into stone, cables running down into a low dugout. Men move there, enemy fighters with scars pulled up, rifles slung. One wears a headset, the side of his face lit by the glow of a small screen. Reyes' stomach drops. The clean shot she'd promised Nolan suddenly isn't clean at all. She's not directly above them. Her angle is off, but if she lies prone where she is and takes the shot at the man, the girl is in her backdrop. A miss, a ricochet through and through. It could hit her as easily as the rock. And even if the physics line up, even if the math says the odds are fine, every story she's heard about collateral damage and propaganda videos whispers at the back of her skull. Not like this, she whispers. The straightforward route to her shelf would keep that line of fire. So she doesn't take it. Instead, she edges sideways along a thinner ledge that skirts the chute. It's narrower, crumbly in places, more exposed to the valley. There are moments when she has maybe an inch of stone beneath her boots and only the friction of glove on rock between her and a 100-meter fall. Her thighs shake. Her fingers ache. She pushes past her body's protests and focuses on increments. This handhold, then that foothold, then the next. After an eternity of breaths, the ledge widens into a shallow groove in the rock. She crawls on her belly the last few meters, easing her pack off to use it as a low prop. With numb fingers, She chips shallow divots into the stone with the butt of her knife, just enough to cradle her elbows to create repeatable bone support. Then she lies still. From up here, the valley reconfigures itself again. What seemed like chaos from the floor now resolves into patterns. Mortar tubes crouch in a depression, smoke curling from their mouths, teams reloading in a practiced rhythm. Machine gun nests on either side of the L pivot and adjust, their fire weaving a lattice that denies movement. The jamming rig squats a little lower than she'd thought, fed by a generator that chugs exhaust into the air. Most important, from this angle, the girl by the goats is no longer in line with the generator. The dugout sits at a slightly different bearing from her shelf, offering a shot that, if placed right, will chew into metal and concrete and leave her free of direct fire. She closes her eyes for a second, feeling the rock under her ribs, the rifle under her hands. The wind whispers over the ridge, bringing with it the ragged echoes of men fighting to stay alive. She opens her eyes. "Short net," she says into the mic, Maya, in position. "What do you see?" Nolan asks, voice tight. She studies the battlefield one more time, painting invisible numbers over everything. "I see everything," she answers. "And I've got a plan." She orders the targets in her head, 1 through 6. Sniper, spotter, jammer, machine gun, RPG, squad leader, each one a domino poised over the next. She breathes in. Down in the valley, the men are still pinned, still bleeding, still waiting for a miracle they don't know is already lining them up in her crosshairs. Up on the shelf, a 19-year-old presses her cheek to cold stock, sights on the first problem she can solve, and squeezes the trigger. The enemy sniper's nest is nothing more than a darker shadow in the rock. Reyes watches for the tiny tells, the faint heat shimmer, the hint of motion when a shooter shifts behind his rifle, the wink of glass behind camouflage netting. She catches it, a brief, almost imperceptible twitch as he adjusts. That's all she needs. "Target 1, she whispers. "Sniper, 750, high angle, 7 degrees right." She lets the breath fall from her, steady as poured water, and breaks the shot. The rifle bucks. Through the scope, she sees the shadow jolt. The glint of glass vanishes as the figure behind it spasms, then slumps. A beat later, a long, precise burst that had been carving chunks from the boulder, shielding Nolan, simply stops, the last round smacking harmlessly into snow. A subtle, confused ripple passes through the enemy line. Gunners shout to each other, looking for the source of the sudden quiet in their symphony. Reyes doesn't wait. She shifts her rifle a fraction, tracking to the mortar slope. The spotter stands slightly apart from the crew, binoculars raised, hand extended as he calls adjustments. He's focused on the main cluster, not the ridgeline. He has no idea death is looking at him from above. "Target 2, she murmurs. "Mortar spotter, 680, slight right wind. Hold low." Her finger squeezes. The spotter's arm freezes mid-gesture, then folds as if someone cut the strings. He falls backward, binoculars spinning from his neck into the snow. The next mortar round lands far from where it was meant to go, artificially short. The crew hesitates, suddenly uncertain without his correction. One of them looks up, scanning the ridges in the wrong direction. On the valley floor, the pressure eases for just a moment. Doc takes advantage, dragging his worst casualty a few precious meters further behind cover before another volley from a different angle forces him flat again. Who the hell is doing that? The machine gunner gasps between gasps, staring up at the ridgeline. Nolan knows. He doesn't dare look for fear of drawing eyes to her, but he knows. His chest tightens with something that feels dangerously like hope. Reyes settles her crosshairs on the jamming site. The headset-wearing coordinator is in the center of her glass, lips moving as he barks orders, one hand on the side of his head, the other gesturing toward a row of screens and panels. The generator chugs nearby, its cables snaking into the equipment cluster. From her angle, the girl and her goats are off to one side now, just out of frame. They're close, but not collinear. If she shoots straight for his chest, there's a chance of a pass-through, a ricochet she can't predict. If she aims elsewhere, she pictures the angles, sees the pathways of the round through metal and wiring instead of flesh. Target 3, she says. Jammer power. Not the man. The heart. She shifts a hair, placing the crosshairs on the thick coil of cable feeding the rig from the generator's control box. A shot there, at this angle, should blow through insulation into the guts of the machine. She breathes. The world squeezes down again to 4 hash marks and the notch between them. The shot cracks out. A splinter of metal leaps from the control panel. Half a second later, the generator coughs, then screams. Sparks fountain as the cable severs. Smoke punches upward in a puff of black against white. In Nolan's ear, the hiss that has been mocking him for an eternity changes. It stutters, morphs, then clears. For the first time since the valley bit down, a familiar, blessedly bored voice cuts through. Steel 3-1, this is Overwatch. We lost you on the net. Sitrep, Garrison, already with the handset in his grip, actually laughs. It's a wild, cracked sound, but it's laughter. Overwatch, this is Steel 3-1 actual. Nolan rams out, words tumbling over each other. We're troops in contact, repeat, massive TIC. Ambushed in Valley Grid, he rattles off the numbers, glancing at his wrist GPS. We are pinned in L-shaped kill zone with effective mortar and machine gun fire from high ground. Request immediate air on these coordinates. Up on the shelf, Reyes can't hear the higher net, but she can see the effect. Heads turn, movements shift. The coordinator at the jammer site stares at his dying equipment, shouting at subordinates, gesturing for someone to get it back up, back on. They scramble with cables and tools, but the damage isn't superficial. The heart she shot is bleeding electricity into the cold air. She goes back to work. Target 4, she murmurs. Heavy machine gun, left ridge. The crew there is already pivoted, trying to locate the new threat. They know someone up high is killing them now. They don't know exactly where. She times her shot with a friendly burst from below, letting the muzzle report blend with the echoes. The round catches the gunner as he leans into the spade grips. He jerks back, drops. The assistant gunner dies behind sandbags, but his hands are now scrambling to stay alive, not feed belts. Reyes swings to the right-hand side of the valley, where she spots the RPG operator crawling along a path, tube slung, trying to get to a flank position that will allow him to lob a rocket into the SEAL's cover. She doesn't give him the chance. Target 5. RPG. 550. The crack. The impact. The man thrashes once, then goes still, the launcher sliding uselessly into the snow. Below, Nolan feels the valley shifting. Holes are appearing in the net that was strangling them. Between bursts of fire that still come in from some positions, he shouts orders. Second element, on me. We're bound to move ING this, one rush at a time. Garrison, keep that bird on the line. Air is 2 minutes out, Steel 3-1, the disembodied voice says. Hold your position. Mark your friendlies when we check in. Copy. The enemy, realizing they're under precision attack from above, adapts fast. There's no panic, just tight efficiency. A squad leader near the jammer barks orders, gesturing sharply upslope. 2 fighters break off and begin making their own ascent toward the ridgeline, rifles slung across their backs, climbing with the practice of men who've done it before. A heavy gun pivots, muzzle swinging upward. It starts chewing into the general area of her shelf, sending plumes of snow and chips of rock into the air. The rounds are off at first, but each suppression burst walks closer, tapping out a deadly rhythm. A new sound joins the mix, the high, insect whine of small drone rising from behind the enemy line. It lifts, wobbles, then steadies, camera turning like a snake's head toward the ridges. Of course, Reyes mutters. Why not? She inches sideways, belly scraping stone, letting the avalanche of rounds chew into where she just was. She can't outrun bullets, but she can stay ahead of their guesses. Figuring they're firing at flashes, she minimizes them. Short exposures, quick shots, then roll. The drone's buzzing gets louder. She can't shoot it. Wasting a rifle round at that angle on such a small, fast target is a fool's game, and every bullet she has is allocated in her mental ledger. Instead, she unclips a small metal mirror from her kit, a simple signaling tool, and wedges it into a crack in the stone a few meters downslope from her position, angled to catch the light. Then she squeezes off another shot at an enemy gun crew, timing it deliberately. Fire, then roll away. The drone, catching the reflection, turns. The heavy gun that's been raking her general area pivots, too, chewing into the rock where the mirror flashes. The mirror explodes in a fountain of sparks and dust. The imaginary sniper they thought they were bracketing is now a shattered glimmer. Reyes, 2 meters to the side, stays very still, lips pressed together until the urge to grin passes. There's no time for satisfaction. One more piece needs to move. The squad leader coordinating the push toward the hard case. He's crouched behind cover, leaning out only to wave fighters forward in short bursts. They listen to him. He's their spine. Target 6, she whispers. Squad leader, near our package. 440. He leans just enough at the wrong moment. Her shot takes him under the chin. He disappears backward. The fighters around him falter, suddenly without direction. A couple go to drag him. A couple freeze. In the delay, Nolan's element surges. Go, he yells, popping up long enough to spit fire toward the enemy position still alive. Bound up to that ledge. Get that case, get our wounded. 2 men sprint, bent low, snow kicking up behind their boots. Fire chases them, but it's thinner now. They slide behind, new cover closer to the wrecked front of their column. Drag the hard case back like it's a casualty. Someone slaps a fresh magazine into the machine gun. The barrel's cooling now, thanks to the enforced pause. Overhead, engines roar. A jet or a fast mover. It's hard to tell in this terrain. The air support they've begged for is inbound, but close air in mountains is always a dance with chance. They'll need precise coordinates and laser discipline. Steel 3-1, this is Hammer 2-1, on station, ready for 9-line, comes the calm, clip pilot voice over the net. Nolan gives it, every number a prayer, Reyes feeding him updated grids from her perch. Left machine gun nest at mortar depression at. As Hammer 2-1 lines up, Reyes scans for what remains that can still hurt them badly. That's when she sees him. Near the smoking ruin of the jammer, a man stands taller than the others. Not by height, but by posture. His gear is cleaner. His rifle is slung, not in his hands. He doesn't need it because his weapons are other people's bullets. He's yelling into a handheld radio, face set, eyes darting between the valley and some point beyond, coordinating with someone who isn't here yet, or who is, and she can't see. She watches the pattern of his yelling. When he speaks, the mortars, even leaderless, try to adjust. When he gestures, men move. When he slams his fist on the jamming equipment, others scramble to fix it. She recognizes him instantly, though she's never seen him before. Center of gravity. If he lives through this, he will build another valley, another kill box. For her, for men like her brother in the framed photo, for strangers on convoys she'll never meet. The radio in his hand is a linchpin. Sever it, and the fragile cohesion they've maintained under her sniping will finally fracture. She inhales, feels the air burn down to her diaphragm. This shot is longer, partly obscured, with wind spilling over the ridge in a wicked cross slope. Her cracked old optic would have helped here, but the backup will have to do. The glass flickers slightly at the edges, but the target is clear in the center. She calibrates in her head, hearing her brother's voice from old days on the range. Trust the math, kiddo. Let the rifle do what it was built to do. She adds a little more hold for wind, a little more for angle. She settles. Last target, she whispers to herself. Command. She presses the trigger. The commander's head snaps sideways. The radio flies from his hand. He drops like a puppet with its strings cut, sliding down the snow-packed incline to rest against the dead metal of the jammer. Down below, enemy movement stutter. 2 fighters, mid-run, glance back, suddenly unsure of where they're supposed to go. One keeps going, but his steps are slower. The other dives behind cover and doesn't reemerge. Hammer 2-1 rolls in, its ordnance whistling down in careful arcs toward the marks Reyes and Nolan coordinated. Explosions bloom high on the ridges away from the SEALs' positions, tearing apart machine gun nests, chewing the edges off the mortar depression, smashing the jamming rig into scrap. The mountain roars, then for a moment goes quiet. The few surviving ambushers break. Some fling down weapons and run for the tree line. Others try to drag their wounded, but there are too many bodies and too little time. Their strategy has failed. The test they were running with real blood won't be written up as a victory in any manual. Push! Nolan yells, his voice raw but fierce. We're moving while it's quiet. I want every man on his feet who can stand. We're bounding out of this bowl. Reyes keeps firing, but now it's measured covering. She picks off anyone who looks like he's trying to set up a last-ditch shot at her men as they move from rock to rock, coiling their line back toward the valley mouth. When the last of them disappears around a bend, dragging sleds improvised from poles and ponchos for the worst of the wounded, she finally lets her rifle but rest fully on the stone. Her hands tremble, now that they're allowed to. Her breath comes in ragged spurts. Reyes, status? Nolan's voice comes faint over the short net. They're at the edge of her range now, volumes dropping. She hesitates, listening to the quiet beneath the occasional distant crack of gunfire and the fading echoes of explosions. Then she answers. Source of the silence neutralized, she says, voice rough. Valley's open. Later, after the last contact, after they've cleared the immediate threat and staggered out of the bowl, after a helicopter dips low enough to load men wrapped in bloody blankets and lift them into the sky, Reyes is left on the ridge with only her rifle and a trail of brass behind her. The valley below is scarred now. Dark craters pockets floor. Where the jamming rig stood, there's only twisted metal and a smear of soot. The improvised bunkers are shattered. The road is chewed up, a jagged, angry wound in the snow. She stands slowly, joints protesting. Slinging her rifle over her shoulder, she begins the careful descent, following her own rope of footprints and claw marks down. Every few meters, she passes a spent casing half buried in drift, the brass dulled by the cold. They're like breadcrumbs marking the path of what she did. At the base, Nolan waits, his face gray with exhaustion, a fresh bandage on his brow. Behind him, medevac birds churn the air, their rotors throwing up gusts that smudge the blood on the snow into abstract art. Body bags lie in a neat line near the landing zone, canvas taut. The smell is different now, antiseptic and fuel layered over iron and cordite. You all right? He asks when she steps into the relative shelter of a vehicle's lee. His voice is quieter than it was in the valley, as if loud words might break something fragile that's holding everyone together. Yes, Chief, she says. Her lips are cracked. She can taste the grit on them. He watches her for a long beat, eyes taking in the flecks of stone on her sleeves, the small rip in her pants where she scraped against rock, the tight clutch of her jaw. You did good, he says finally. She nods because she doesn't know what else to do. Debrief in an hour, he adds. Intel vultures are already circling. Get some water, maybe a hot pack if they got one. In a makeshift tent that serves as an intel shop, heat from a space heater competes with the cold seeping through the canvas walls. A table is littered with captured enemy maps and salvaged electronics hauled in from the valley before they blew what they couldn't carry. The intel chief points to a crudely drawn diagram they found in a notebook, lines matching the valley almost exactly, arrows indicating arcs of fire, little symbols for mines and positions. This wasn't their first rehearsal, he says, half to Nolan, half to himself. Look at this. They've been gaming this out, testing jamming ranges, fire control from that rig. Today was a live exercise. See if they can cut off a patrol, jam comms, walk fires, and then push a capture team to seize high-value stuff. He taps the black hard case, now back on their side of the table, its latches resecured, its exterior scuffed and burned. They had us dead to rights on this. If they grabbed it, they'd have our drone patterns, convoy schedules, even some of our counter-ID routing. That's future kills, not just today. Nolan imagines that future, a convoy winding through some other valley, trusting a drone feed that suddenly drops, trusting a route marked low threat, built from data they didn't realize had been stolen. He feels his stomach knot. Test site, the intel chief continues. That valley? before they work out how to shut us up and cut us off. They export that playbook elsewhere once it's proven. Not anymore, Nolan says, thinking of twisted metal and blackened earth. Then, after a moment, not like that anyway. The intel officer glances at him. You realize if Reyes hadn't flagged those track patterns and that glint back at base, we might not have had the foothold we needed. And if she hadn't climbed, he doesn't finish. He doesn't have to. Later, when things are quieter, another operator asks Reyes the question that's been hanging in the air since the shooting stopped. How did you stay that calm? He says, leaning in the doorway of the small room where she's cleaning her rifle. Up on that shelf. All that math, all that killing. You sounded like you were reading a shopping list. She doesn't look up immediately. The cleaning rod moves smoothly through the barrel. Her hands, finally warmed by the heater, are steady again. I wasn't calm, she says. I was busy. He huffs a laugh. That's not really an answer. She sighs, sets the rifle down, and stares at the flag case perched awkwardly on a shelf in the corner of the room. The fluorescent light above it flickers, making the white stars wink. When I was younger, she says slowly, my brother was on a patrol. They got hit. Not like this, different place, different worse, same old story. They called for support. The first shooter on the range, who could have taken the shot, choked. He hesitated, second-guessed his math, and by the time he was ready, the window was gone. She rubs a thumb along the rifle's receiver. The reports don't say he could have saved my brother, she continues. You can't prove that, but they say he might have. Years later, that shooter told me what happened. Her voice softens. He said he still wakes up some nights, feeling the trigger under his finger, wishing he'd trusted himself sooner. The operator is quiet. I promise myself, she finishes, that if anyone else had to be buried, it would never be because I hesitated. I can't control the rest. Just the math. Just a trigger. He nods slowly. There's no bravado in his face now. No locker room teasing. Just a kind of tired respect. Glad your trigger finger works the way it does, he says, and then he leaves her with her rifle and her ghosts. Command does what command always does. Writes the story down in careful, clinical language. In a cramped office, an officer reads from a printed citation while Reyes stands at a parody of attention, snow still crusted on her boots. For exceptionally meritorious conduct in the face of hostile fire, he drones. Petty Officer Reyes' actions directly contributed to the preservation of her unit and the disruption of an enemy ambush. She hears the words, but doesn't feel them. They slide past like wind. The medal they pin on her chest is small. The office is smaller. The details of the day are compressed into a paragraph that doesn't mention the mirror decoy, the shepherd girl, the way her hands finally shook when it was over. Afterward, she returns to the weapons room. It smells like oil and steel and a faint hint of coffee from a forgotten mug on a shelf. She sits on a stool, lays the rifle across her knees, and starts the ritual of cleaning again. Strip, inspect, wipe, reassemble. Grounding through motion. Through the thin wall, she hears voices from the common area. Rowan's among them, rough and familiar. I'm telling you, man, he says. We were done. They had us in the worst box I've ever seen. Mine's, mortars, comms dead. I've never felt so ignored by the universe. Laughter, the bitter kind, follows. And then, someone prompts. And then it's like God tapped a 19-year-old on the shoulder and said, hey, mind fixing this? Rowan says. His voice cracks just a little on the joke. You should have seen it. One moment we're chewing snow and waiting to die. Next moment, sniper fire stops. Mortars start missing. Jammer explodes. Air checks in. All because she climbed up a mountain none of us even considered and started plucking pieces off the board like she was cleaning a rifle. She, another voice asks. Reyes. Rowan says, and there's none of the earlier scoff in the way. He says her name now. Kid's only 19. 19. And she's the reason any of us walked out of that valley. Reyes pauses, oilcloth suspended over the bolt. Something twists in her chest. Not pride exactly, not relief, but a strange, fragile sense of being seen and not entirely wanting to be. She sets the clean bolt back into the rifle with a small, precise click. Later still, when the birds are gone and the base falls into the particular hush of a winter night in the mountains, she steps outside. The sky is clear, brutal stars punching through the cold. Her breath plumes out, then vanishes. She walks to the edge of the wire and looks toward the shape of the valley in the distance. From here, it's just a darker notch in the horizon. The scars they carved into it are invisible at this range. The kill box is gone, dismantled. The snow will fall again soon and cover up the craters, the spent casings, the blackened spots where metal melted. But from above, she imagines it, the satellite view updating, new imagery overriding the old. There will always be a faint difference in color where the earth was burned. A ghost of a pattern where an enemy tried to learn how to silence people like her and failed. At her feet, half buried near the wire, a glint catches her eye. She crouches, brushes snow away, and finds a single brass casing someone must have kicked out of their pocket. It's unremarkable, clogged with wet. She turns it in her fingers, feeling the weight of it, thinking of the trail she left on the ridge. She slips it into her pocket without quite knowing why. They kept saying she was only 19. Nolan had said earlier in the debrief, summing things up for some distant headset listening hard. That day, 19 was exactly old enough to save them all. Reyes doesn't hear that line. It lives in transcripts, in reports, in the stories her teammates will tell later in bars and backyards and on couches when a certain kind of silence falls between sentences. She just feels the cold air on her face, the familiar weight of the rifle on her shoulder, and the tiny edge of metal pressing against the lining of her pocket as she turns back toward the heater's glow. Behind her, the valley lies quiet under the stars, the echo of gunfire long gone. Only faint scars remain where, for a few terrible hours, the snow itself had seemed to be trying to kill them, and where a lone shooter, perched on a razor-thin shelf of rock, found a way to break the siege one round at a time.